She was born into a world that had no use for her. The name Mary Flora Bell would one day be whispered with unease, written in newspapers alongside words like evil, cold, and inhuman. But long before the cameras, before the trials, before the nation tried to understand how an 11-year-old girl could commit acts that even hardened criminals recoiled from, Mary existed in a quieter kind of darkness, one that seeped into her life long before she ever understood what darkness meant. Her mother, Betty, was only 17 when Mary was born, too young, too reckless, too unstable to handle a child. Those who lived near the Bells in Newcastle remembered Betty as a girl who seemed to survive on the chaos she created. She drifted through the streets with a swagger that was part bravado, part desperation. She was known for short tempers, loud arguments, and a kind of wildness that no one could tame. She worked the streets at night, disappearing for hours and returning with the scent of smoke and men on her clothes. Mary was not a baby born into gentle arms. She was born into the arms of someone who did not want them filled. Relatives later whispered that Betty tried, more than once, to give Mary away. Some claimed she attempted to place her into strangers' arms, insisting she couldn't look after her. Others went further, saying Betty may have put Mary in danger deliberately, as if hopping the universe would remove the problem for her. Whether these accusations were true or exaggerated by neighborhood gossip, what is undeniable is this: Betty did not want her daughter. And a child can sense when they are unwanted long before they have the words to describe it. Mary learned early that affection was not a currency she could afford. What she found instead was instability. Nights where her mother vanished and mornings where she woke alone. Days when she was passed between relatives like an object no one wanted to keep for long. In these formative years, the seed of disconnection took root, growing quietly, growing deeply, changing something essential inside her. People sometimes imagine trauma as a sudden, violent moment, but Mary's trauma wasn't a single blow. It was a slow drip, a steady erosion of everything that nurtures empathy. Neglect is its own form of cruelty, though it leaves no visible scars. It shapes a mind in silence, telling a child over and over again, "You are alone. You are unimportant. You are nothing." Mary's earliest memories were shaped by this solitude. She learned to swallow emotions long before she learned to read. She learned not to cry because no one came. She learned not to ask questions because no one answered. Her world was a place where she survived on her own, mentally, emotionally, socially. A child cannot endure that without something shifting inside them. For a while, people hoped her father might be a stabilizing force, but even the identity of her father was blurry, contradictory, and shrouded in the same instability that followed her mother. Some believed her father was a man named Billy, a violent criminal with a lengthy record. He drifted through the neighborhood like a shadow, never fully present, never fully gone. Others insisted there were multiple men in Betty's life, and it was impossible to know who Mary belonged to. Yet in some strange way, Mary gravitated toward Billy more than anyone else. He was unpredictable, sometimes aggressive, but he at least acknowledged her existence. For a child starved of attention, even flawed recognition becomes valuable. There were moments, rare, fleeting, when he showed her a rough kind of care. But there were other moments too, moments filled with shouting and tension, moments where his presence added fear instead of comfort. Mary absorbed everything. Children growing in chaotic homes often become deeply observant. They learn to read danger the way other kids read picture books. They learn to mimic the behaviors around them to survive. Mary learned early that anger was powerful. She learned that silence could be a weapon. She learned that emotions were things you controlled, not things that controlled you. And slowly, quietly, something inside her hardened. Those who knew Mary as a toddler would later describe her as strange, aloof, watchful. She did not cry the way other children cried. She did not cling to adults the way neglected children often do. She moved differently, calm, composed, almost calculating in her stillness. Even at 3 or 4 years old, there was an uncanny quality to her presence, as if she understood the world through a lens sharper than any child should. Some would say later that she was cold. Others would say damaged. But the truth is, Mary was something far more complicated. She was the product of a home carved out of dysfunction and madness. If Mary's childhood had been only neglect, perhaps her life would have found a different ending. But the darkness in her house was not limited to absence. It was also filled with the wrong kind of presence. Betty brought men into the home frequently. Loud voices, strange footsteps, unfamiliar smells drifting through the rooms. Some of these men treated Mary with indifference. Others treated her with hostility. There were rumors, heavy, haunting rumors, about what Mary endured behind closed doors. Rumors that social workers whispered but could not prove. Rumors that neighbors hinted at but feared to confront. Whatever truth lay there, Mary was exposed to things a child should never witness. Her young mind became shaped not only by abandonment but by inappropriate adult worlds forced upon her. This exposure twisted her sense of boundaries, trust, and normality. Childhood is meant to be a place of safety. Mary was a place of chaos, and chaos raises children differently. As she grew older, her behaviors became harder to dismiss. She was unpredictable at school. She lied with ease, not in the playful way most children experiment with, but with a smoothness that unsettled her teachers. She often seemed detached, emotionally distant from other children, as though observing them from behind an invisible wall. Her temper could ignite instantly, erupting in sudden fits of anger that startled those around her. Then just as quickly, she would become calm again, composure snapping back into place like a mask she had learned to wear. Adults found her difficult to understand. She could charm when she wanted to, offering polite smiles or thoughtful comments that made her seem older than her age. But beneath that thin layer of maturity lay something darker, a sharpness, a readiness to lash out, a disturbing lack of empathy. There were early incidents, small, ignored, forgotten by most. A neighbor's child pushed too hard, left crying in the dirt. A cat handled roughly. A younger child frightened by Mary's games. Little things the kind people shrug off because kids will be kids. But Mary's actions were not the careless mistakes of childhood. They were precise, intentional, controlled. She seemed curious, almost fascinated by the reactions of others, how fear changed them, how pain revealed something vulnerable. She studied these reactions the way other children studied lessons, absorbing the data quietly, storing it for reasons no one understood at the time. By the age of 8, Mary had already developed a reputation among the local children. Some feared her. Others followed her in the way children sometimes follow those who intimidate them. She told strange stories, invented scenarios that left little ones trembling. She learned how to manipulate them, how to push them to do things they didn't want to do. Adults heard rumors but brushed them aside. Every neighborhood has its difficult child, they told themselves. And Mary, with her angelic face and dark eyes, didn't fit the image of true danger. But beneath that face, something was forming, something cold and calculating, something that had learned early to detach from emotion, something that understood power in a way a child should never understand it. The world had created Mary Bell long before she committed her first act of violence. The neglect did not simply starve her of love. It starved her of connection, connection to others, connection to feelings, connection to consequences. The unstable men in her life did not simply frighten her. They taught her that dominance and control were paths to survival. The trauma she endured did not simply wound her. It chiseled her into someone who saw life differently. In the years before her crimes, Mary wandered through the streets of Newcastle as if searching for something, searching for control, searching for meaning, searching for a place to direct the storm inside her. Teachers noticed the strange emptiness in her eyes, how they never seemed to match her words. Other children felt uneasy around her without knowing why. There was in Mary a sense of duplicity, a dual nature. One part of her capable of smiling sweetly, speaking politely, blending into the fragile structure of childhood. The other part detached, observant, and unfeeling, like a cold wind slipping through the cracks of a warm home. This duality grew stronger with time. By age 10, she had become a paradox, a child with the instincts of a predator. She could be kind one moment, cruel the next. Empathy flickered in her briefly, then vanished entirely. Her emotional responses mismatched every situation, as though she was guessing what a reaction should look like rather than feeling it naturally. Her mother's world continued to unravel around her, and Mary learned to navigate that unraveling with unsettling ease. She saw things she should not see. She heard conversations she should not hear. She learned adult behaviors without understanding adult consequences. In the absence of guidance, she built her own moral compass, but it pointed nowhere. It spun freely, uncontrolled, indifferent. And in that void, where empathy should grow, where attachment should form, Mary developed something else. A fascination. A deep, unsettling fascination with the fragility of others. She watched younger children the way a scientist watches an experiment. She toyed with their fears. She pushed their boundaries. She tested reactions, measured responses. It was as if she was trying to understand something that disturbed her, something she couldn't articulate, why people felt things she didn't, why their emotions seemed so big, why their tears came so easily, why pain on their faces looked interesting. Something was taking shape inside her, something that had been building for years. A hunger, not for violence itself, but for understanding power, control. The moment when another person's fate rested in her hands. And the world around her, blind to the storm brewing beneath her small frame, continued to dismiss the warning signs. They shrugged off the strange comments. They ignored the unexplained incidents. They wrote Mary off as a troubled child, a difficult child, a child who needed discipline, not understanding. No one realized that Mary's childhood was no longer shaping her. It was creating something altogether different, something colder, something detached, something that would one day lead her to cross a line almost no child in history had ever crossed. And by the time anyone realized what Mary was capable of, the darkness in her had already decided its course. A course that would soon lead to tragedy. A course that would make the world ask a question it still struggles with today. Was Mary Bell born evil? Or was she made? Mary's world had become a landscape of contradictions by the time she reached 11 years old. She looked like any other child wandering the streets of Newcastle, small, slight, with a face that could appear soft and innocent when she needed it to. But beneath that exterior, something had calcified. The early years of neglect and chaos had begun to fuse into a single, unyielding identity. She walked the streets with a strange mix of aimlessness and purpose, drifting alongside other children, yet always separate from them in a way they didn't understand. There were moments when Mary seemed to mimic normal childhood behavior, joining games or talking with neighbors, but anyone paying close attention could sense an oddness in her. Her laughter rarely matched the emotion of the moment. It always came a fraction too late or sounded slightly hollow, as though she had heard other children laugh and was attempting to copy the rhythm without grasping the meaning behind it. She spoke about things that made others uncomfortable, telling stories that were too dark, too violent, too mature for her age. When confronted, she offered small shrugs or wide-eyed innocence, her expression shifting like a mask she had practiced for years. Children began to fear her, though most could not explain why. Younger ones avoided her entirely, sensing something instinctively wrong about her presence. Older children tried to distance themselves but found themselves drawn back by curiosity or, in some cases, intimidation. Mary had a way of making others feel small without raising her voice. She could manipulate emotions with the precision of someone much older. She understood what frightened others and used it not impulsively, but deliberately, as though she was testing the boundaries of what fear could produce. In the weeks leading up to the events that would define her life forever, Mary's behavior became more unsettling. She was seen wandering near derelict buildings, watching younger children play with an intensity that made adults pause. Neighbors overheard disturbing remarks, offhand comments about death that no child should speak so casually about. Teachers noticed a deepening coldness in her demeanor, a lack of emotional reaction during lessons that would have brought giggles or gasps from others. One moment in particular stayed with a teacher, Mary sitting alone, staring at a classmate with an expression so blank and yet so piercing that the teacher intervened, asking what she was thinking about. Mary's reply was simple, quiet, and delivered without blinking. Nothing. But the teacher sensed it wasn't true. There was something in Mary's eyes, something calculated, something unreadable, something that suggested her mind was elsewhere entirely. Not in the classroom, not in her imagination. Somewhere darker. Her home life grew no steadier. Betty's volatility increased, and the environment inside their flat became more chaotic. Mary floated through this chaos like a ghost, unaffected on the surface yet absorbing everything beneath it. She heard the fights, the screaming, the slamming doors. She saw men she didn't know coming and going at all hours. She watched her mother spiral further into a life that had no place for a child. The absence of tenderness was complete. There was no softness left in that home, no warmth, no structure, no reprieve. For Mary, the world had become divided into two categories, those who had power and those who did not. Her mother wielded power recklessly, weaponizing unpredictability. The men who drifted through their home wielded whatever dominance they could impose. And Mary, small and young, learned early that the only way not to be the prey was to become something else entirely. She began asserting control in small ways, over objects, over situations, over people, especially over those who were younger than her. They were easy to influence, easy to scare, and easy to manipulate. Mary learned quickly that power fed something inside her, something gnawing, something that whispered that she could decide the fate of others. Even in minor misbehaviors, taking a toy from a child, pushing someone too hard, threatening a classmate, there was a pattern forming, a pattern of dominance, a pattern of curiosity, a pattern of testing the limits of what she could get away with. Adults missed the signs or chose to ignore them. Children complained, but their fears were waved off. Some said Mary had tried to hurt them. Others said she tried to frighten them on purpose. Each time, Mary denied everything, offering explanations delivered with a straight face and calm tone. Her lies were smooth, practiced, effective. Adults wanted to believe her. They wanted to believe a child could not hold such malice. And so Mary learned an important lesson, that she could do alarming things and walk away unchallenged if her face remained calm and her voice steady. This emboldened her. She pushed further. The first tragic event, a boy found dead in derelict surroundings, was brushed off as an accident. Children played there often. It was a dangerous place, full of debris and unstable structures. The world accepted the explanation quickly, not wanting to consider the possibility that something else had happened, not wanting to consider that a child might have caused it, not wanting to look at Mary too closely. But children whispered. Children knew. Children who had been with her, near her, around her, sensed something that adults did not. They spoke in hushed voices about the strange feelings they got when she watched them, about the things she said that didn't sound like normal play, about how she seemed to take pleasure in their fear. But no one listened. No one wanted to believe that a girl of 11 could be the source of something so dark. Mary, meanwhile, carried on as if nothing unusual had occurred. If she felt any guilt, she did not show it. If anything, she seemed calmer in the following days, as though something inside her had been satisfied or perhaps awakened. She watched the adults discuss the tragedy with wide eyes, offering sympathy with a practiced innocence that fooled nearly everyone. She observed how they talked about danger, about accidents, about misfortune. She absorbed their explanations, their assumptions, their avoidance of ugly possibilities. She learned that when tragedy strikes, adults are often eager to find the simplest answer. And Mary understood that the simplest answer would never be her. Her behavior grew more erratic, more unpredictable. Teachers noticed her disturbing drawings, her strange remarks, her moments of emotional detachment. She spoke of death as though it were a casual thing, mentioning it in play in ways that sent shivers through those who overheard. Children avoided her more openly now. They felt the wrongness around her, a wrongness they could not define but could not ignore. Mary did not seem bothered by their fear. If anything, she seemed intrigued by it. She watched them with the same unblinking intensity she had shown earlier in the school year, studying their reactions as though collecting data. Their fear fascinated her. Their discomfort seemed to amuse her. She learned how to provoke it with subtle gestures, small comments, quiet threats that carried far more weight than their words suggested. Her temper, though controlled in certain moments, emerged in others with chilling clarity. She could explode suddenly, her face twisting with anger, then just as swiftly return to calmness. The transition was so abrupt, so unnatural that it left adults uneasy without knowing why. They saw the outburst as childish misbehavior. They saw her composure afterward as obedience. They did not see the underlying instability. As days passed, Mary's curiosity about control deepened. She began spending more time near younger children, watching them from a distance or engaging with them in ways that made others uncomfortable. She used her age and her confidence to assert influence. Some children followed her reluctantly. Others avoided her but found themselves cornered by her persistence. She knew how to isolate them, how to separate them from their peers, how to create situations where she held the authority. She fed off the imbalance. The adults around her, occupied with their own struggles, their own routines, their own blind optimism that children are inherently innocent, failed to recognize the danger that was growing. They saw behaviors but not patterns. They noticed incidents but not escalation. They observed the surface while the deeper current went undetected. Mary grew bolder. Her remarks became darker, her games more unsettling. She spoke about death not with fear but with familiarity, as though discussing a topic she had thought about carefully. She made other children cry, then watched their tears with a chilling detachment, offering no comfort. Her eyes followed their reactions, scanning their fear, their vulnerability, their helplessness. It seemed to fascinate her. It seemed to answer a question inside her that no adult knew she was asking. There were warnings clear. Obvious warnings that should have prompted intervention. A child injured in her presence without a clear explanation. Another frightened by something Mary said. A third refusing to play if Mary was nearby. Each time the incidents were dismissed. Children squabble, adults reassured themselves. Children hurt each other without meaning harm. Children imagine things. Children exaggerate. And Mary, small, composed, with the face of innocence, was the last person they expected to be the cause of real danger. But the darkness in Mary had been building for years. It had been shaped by neglect, fed by instability, sharpened by the coldness of her world. She had learned early that emotions were irrelevant, that trust was fragile, that attachment offered only vulnerability. She had learned that power came from instilling fear, from commanding obedience, from holding the fate of another in her hands. And she had learned that adults were slow to see what they did not want to believe. In the days before everything changed, Mary wandered the neighborhood with a strange stillness inside her. She seemed neither rushed nor restless, just present, existing in a world she watched with quiet calculation. Neighbors saw her standing alone near the derelict buildings, staring into windows, watching younger children play. She drifted through the streets like a small shadow, unnoticed until she stepped into someone's line of vision. There was a sense that she was waiting for something, though no one could have guessed what. Then came the moment, the decision, the crossing of a line she had stood beside for years. Mary found a younger child, smaller, trusting, unaware of the danger standing before him. She approached with the same calm demeanor she often used, her voice steady, her expression neutral. She offered a game, an adventure, a moment of excitement. She knew how to sound sincere. She knew how to lure. Children want to trust older kids. They want to feel included. They want to believe in friendship. Mary knew that. As they walked together, Mary's mind moved with a clarity that belied her age. There was no hesitation, no uncertainty. She understood exactly what she was doing, and she understood the gravity of it in a way that made her actions even more chilling. She guided him toward isolation, toward a quiet place where no one would interrupt. The child followed willingly, unaware of the darkness walking beside him. What happened next would become the subject of court documents, psychological reports, and national disbelief. But more important than the act itself was the aftermath, the way Mary behaved in the hours and days that followed. She did not panic. She did not flee. She did not show remorse. She watched adults react with confusion and shock. She listened to their theories, their assumptions, their desperate attempts to cling to explanations that spared them from believing the truth. She inserted herself into conversations, offering comments that unsettled those who heard them. She returned to the scene as though drawn to it, observing the reactions of others with a detached curiosity. There was a moment, quiet, almost imperceptible, when Mary seemed to enjoy the chaos she had caused. Not in a childish way, not with giggles or excitement, but with a stillness that suggested something inside her had been affirmed. She had crossed the line, and she had learned that she could. The world around her began to sense something amiss. Adults noticed inconsistencies in her behavior. Children whispered more urgently. Teachers expressed concern. The unease grew, though it remained unspoken. People felt a chill they could not explain when Mary walked by. Something about her changed, though no one could articulate what it was. Mary had stepped into a realm from which there was no return. The darkness that had simmered within her for years had finally manifested itself. But this was only the beginning. Everything that happened next, every reaction, every decision, every chilling moment, would lead the world to confront the reality it had spent years ignoring. The child they dismissed, the child they overlooked, the child they excused, was capable of something far more monstrous than anyone imagined. In the days after the tragedy, something strange began to happen around Mary. Children avoided her with a new urgency. Their fear was sharper now, closer to instinct than suspicion. They spoke to each other in whispers, eyes darting toward her whenever she passed by. Some ran home as soon as they saw her. Others hid behind their parents when she came near. They didn't understand what they sensed, but they felt the truth in their bones. Mary was no longer just a strange girl. She was something else entirely, something dangerous, something to run from. And Mary saw all of it. She watched the fear spread like a quiet fire. She watched the way adults grew cautious when she approached, their smiles thinner, their voices tighter. She watched the way neighborhoods shifted around her presence, how parents pulled their children closer when she passed. She absorbed every reaction, every tremor in their voices, every glance of discomfort. It fascinated her in a way nothing else ever had. She was learning how to read power not just in silence, not just in observation, but in consequence. Yet she behaved as though nothing unusual had happened. She walked the familiar paths through the neighborhood, her pace slow, her expression neutral. She engaged in conversations with an eerie calmness, speaking about ordinary things with a steady voice that unnerved anyone who listened too long. Her face betrayed nothing, not fear, not excitement, not guilt. It was as though a mask had fused to her skin. For Mary, the world had changed after the tragedy, but not in the way people expected. Rather than fear being born in her, something else emerged, a strange sense of clarity, a quiet understanding that the line she had crossed was one she could cross again, and if adults refused to see the truth, then there was nothing to stop her. Mary's behavior in the days that followed became increasingly erratic. She made comments that chilled those who heard them, remarks far too cold for a child to make. She referenced the tragedy casually as though discussing the weather. She described feelings she didn't have, mimicking sorrow or shock when it suited her, but her eyes never matched her words. They were too still, too controlled, too empty. Investigators would later describe her gaze as unsettling, calm in the wrong moments, curious when she should have been frightened, and distant when she pretended to care. It wasn't the eyes of a child trying to hide guilt. It was the eyes of someone who did not understand why she should feel any. The community sensed something was wrong, but people clung to explanations that made sense in their world. No one wanted to believe a child could be capable of such intentions. No one wanted to imagine that innocence could be twisted so completely. They blamed misfortune, accidents, misunderstandings, anything but the truth. But these excuses did not change what Mary had become. And then, as if unable to stop the momentum of her own darkness, Mary moved again. This time she was not subtle. The intensity inside her had grown. Something in her seemed unsettled, restless, pushing her toward another boundary. The sense of danger she carried became something almost tangible, drifting around her like a cold fog. When she approached younger children now, they did not just feel uneasy, they felt afraid. They felt the wrongness in her presence, the same way an animal senses a predator before it sees one. Mary found another child, younger once again. A child who trusted, who followed, who did not sense the danger quickly enough. And just as before, Mary guided the moment with chilling precision. The path she walked was deliberate. Her tone remained calm. Her expression stayed controlled. She moved through the world with a strange stillness, as though she understood her role in a grim script only she could read. What happened next would transform the tragedy into a nightmare that the entire nation would eventually confront. Not because of the act itself, but because of the age of the one who committed it. Because of the coldness with which she behaved afterward. Because of the darkness that seemed to emanate from her despite her small size and childlike appearance. When the second tragedy unfolded, shock rippled through the community. Two incidents so close together could no longer be dismissed. Two young lives ended in circumstances too similar, too disturbingly connected. And slowly, fear turned into suspicion. Mary remained composed, studying the grown-ups as they gathered in worry and confusion. She listened to them talk about danger as though they were trying to construct a puzzle with the wrong pieces. She heard their voices tremble, saw the way their hands shook as they gestured toward the places where the children had been found.